Hey, Glenn here. I'm going to take you on a tour of my garden today. First, I'm going to show you some things that I've been picking in the garden this year. I've had really good luck with tomatoes. I've got a couple different heirloom varieties that I got at Lowe's. This one's called a German brown. It's got a more of a pinkish cast to it rather than red. Very dark red interior and very large. I've got some other heirloom tomatoes. This variety is called Homestead. Again, it's a very large tomato. With all the big tomatoes, you'll get a little bit of splitting on the top, maybe a little bit of like a browning spot on the bottom, but when you cut those off, the rest of it's just fine. I've got a lot of those. I've got some Romas. I'm doing real well with Romas this year. We'll use those for salsa and making sauce. I've got some of the large red cherries. They're great just by themselves. You can actually stuff them also. Probably my best tomatoes that I have every year are my yellow pear tomatoes. You'll get just thousands of these off just a few plants. And then I've got some grape tomatoes, much smaller, great for salads. And you can see in my basket here, this is the first year I've experimented with potatoes. I grew some red and some white potatoes. Most of them are probably about 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. So let's take a look at the garden here. I use the raised bed method, and what I did was, this garden's about 6 years old, and I took some redwood 2x6s, 2x12s, and I just set them up. Most of the beds are about 3 feet wide and maybe about 6 to 8 feet long, and pretty much just fill them with mulch. In this one bed right here, I've got some nice zucchini, some onions, and an Ichiban eggplant, which is the Japanese thin eggplant. And I'm coming over to my first tomato bed here. These are those Homestead heirloom tomatoes, and the plants are pretty good size and they're just completely loaded. I'll bet there's probably 40 or 50 of those large tomatoes on here. And then a little farther on here, I've got my Romas. The Roma tomatoes, again, usually my Roma tomato plants only grow about 2 feet tall. This year about 3 feet tall, and just completely loaded all the way through. My next bed over here, I've got some bell pepper. Got a couple of those. And then I've got this just gigantic large red cherry, and it's gotten so large that I had to actually drape it over the rest of this whole garden bed. If I measured the whole length of the plant, it's probably about 8 to 10 feet long, and I'm just going to get just hundreds of those red cherry tomatoes off this plant. I come around the bend here, and this is my other heirloom tomato. This is the German brown. Gotta zoom in a little bit here. These are those ones that have kind of a pinkish cast to them. And as I back off here, this single plant is probably about 6 feet tall and maybe 6 feet wide. It's growing out in all different directions. My yellow pear tomatoes, I built this large trellis. This trellis is about 8 feet tall because the plants will get this tall and even taller if I went higher. The yellow pear tomatoes are great. You'll just get thousands of tomatoes. I've got just 3 plants here, and the yellow pear tomatoes will also come back every year from seed, from tomatoes that have dropped in the past, and they'll produce tomatoes just as good as the plants that you get at the nursery. One real advantage of these yellow tomatoes is that when it gets hot, the birds will start coming around, and they will peck into the red tomatoes for the moisture because they're thirsty and they need the moisture. And I think the yellow tomatoes aren't as easily recognized because of the color, and so the birds will pass these by usually, and they'll attack the red ones, and then you'll have all your yellow ones intact. This is another gigantic yellow pear tomato right in front of us here. This plant's probably about 7 feet tall and probably about 7 feet wide. It's growing all over the place. I probably have too much shade in my garden, but they're still growing well. My raised beds within my raised beds, I ran a drip irrigation system and hooked it to my regular sprinkler timer. And I have drip heads at each plant. Probably the most important thing in your garden, especially in the summertime, is to make sure everything's watered. And if you left it up to trying to remember when to do it, you're not going to do it enough, and your plants are going to suffer. I've got a couple pepper plants down here. That's a yellow wax. And then I've got one called a Big Jim, which is like an Anaheim pepper. So I've got a little bit of everything in here. And on my raised beds, I'm pretty much just running straight mulch. 6 years ago, I started with dirt and mulch. And now I have pretty much been adding my own mulch that I make at home. I take all my grass clippings and compost them. In between my beds, I don't know if you can see down here, I put a cedar bark just to keep it from being muddy when it gets wet. And then on the sunny side, I have a wooden trellis that I built out of some leftover material from a remodeling job I was working on. And then I've planted some vines. I can't remember the name of them, but the vines have grown all up on the trellis, and that provides some really good afternoon sun protection to the plants and really helps out when things get really warm. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed your tour. Thank you.